The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Okay, it's out. The schedule is out. And the team that had been pretty much set for 1 o'clock games over the years, well, it may be inconvenient for some people, but there's a bunch of night games. They're going to play on Christmas Day. There's still the flexing that could go on late in the season, so a couple of these 1 o'clock games could be flexed out once we get to December. You never know. But it is what it is. And I will get to some of the kvetching that's going on right now about this schedule, which really makes me laugh. And then we'll do what we always do, and it is the most useless exercise in sports radio, but it's a tradition unlike any other, and we're going to go through game by game and make our predictions. I used to do this with sometimes a room full of people, as many as 2 or 3 other people, but it's just me today, so I'll go through the schedule and tell you what I think, which will be completely meaningless when we get to the end of the season. Now, I can't do what I did for many, many years, and that was pick the record somewhere between 7 and 9 wins. That's generally the area that they were in. Like if it was a typical season, they'd win 7, maybe 6. If it was really bad, they'd win 4, as little as 3. And if it was really good, they might have a chance to win 9, but they weren't winning 11. They went between the 1991 season and last season not getting 11 wins. So whatever the number is, 33 years. And that was the longest active streak in the NFL. So now the clock resets, and they got their 12 wins last year, and the organization is completely different. I mean, the schedule is representative of that. But let me just take a minute here to address something that I find to be very humorous. I listen to very little sports radio. I do this show. I listen to Kevin Sheehan some, and maybe the Junkies for a few minutes in the morning. But that's about it. I am far removed from the days where I was hosting a show on the other station, which is owned by the other station. I spent the bulk of my career at the AM station, and the FM station, I was lucky enough to work there for a couple of years, part-time and fill in and stuff like that. And I've been here for almost 6 years, and this has been absolutely fine. The other 2 stations are owned by the same company. At one point, they were competitors. But they employ some people who I worked with, one of them for a reasonable length of time, who always seems to want to make it about himself. So as the schedule speculation was cranking up earlier this week, where, you know, it was announced that the Commanders were going to play on Saturday the 20th, which would seem to open the door for them to play on Christmas, which is exactly what's happened. He went into his full-on whining about, he's got to work 12 hours. And then I guess there's somebody else. Again, I haven't listened to any of this. I'm just picking this up from social media. But there's somebody else from the other station who's also complaining about this. Hey, you know what? You want to be off on Christmas? Go work at the post office. I would say go work for the government, but those jobs have as much job security these days as this one does. How about that you get to work on Christmas and you get to cover a football game? You get paid to eat free food in the press box. It's a home game. You get to watch the game from a paid-for seat. And if you do your job, and again, I don't think either of these stations will collapse if these 2 individuals don't participate in covering the game. But if you do choose to work on those days, on that day, on Christmas Day, I consider it a privilege. You get to do it. And if you don't want to do it, if you want to leave this job and get a job where you have holidays off, which nobody in broadcasting does, whether you cover sports or not, it's something that you accept once you take one of these jobs, then there'll be plenty of people who would be happy to take your job. And I venture to say that the station's ratings won't reflect the change very much. You're not, how about the people who have to work in emergency rooms on Christmas Day? Those people are needed. The people at the fire department, at the police department, they have to do their jobs. And this whining about the NFL being greedy and putting games on Christmas Day, hey, they're a business. And part of the American tradition, and it's changed, really. I've seen this even in my years in sports radio, where I used to hear about people who would go to these Thanksgiving dinners, and the family they were going to, or even their own family, would say, oh, no, don't turn on the television. We don't want you watching football on Thanksgiving. Forget that. That ship has sailed. That's like the Yule log for everybody. After the dinner or before the dinner, you gather around the television, you watch the game. If you want to chat, you can. If you want to watch the game, you can. But the NFL has done a great job of this, and they have become a big-time television show. And if you want to have the most eyeballs on your product, you schedule games when you know people are going to be home, like Christmas, like in the evenings, like Thanksgiving. And I only worked in Dallas for a couple of years, so I only covered 2 of the Thanksgiving games there. And it was actually good for me because I did a lot of freelance work during those games and made about what I was making per week during that one day. But there were people there who had been covering the Cowboys for 25, 30 years. They never had Thanksgiving with their family. They accepted that. That was part of the job. So anybody who's complaining, particularly in the media, about the NFL being greedy and scheduling the Commanders on Christmas Day, again, go find yourself a job where you have holidays off. That's not how this works. This is a job where you work often, and Sunday games, night games, you're working often when other people are not. And while they are working, often you are not working. That's kind of the way the clock works, and you're part of the entertainment business. You may want to consider yourself a journalist. That's fine, but it's also sports. It's not necessary for the culture. It's part of the entertainment of the culture. It's fun. It's something that we can enjoy. But to make yourself into a martyr because, oh my God, I've got to work on Christmas, and hey, you know what? That's the way it is. And a lot of people are in this business who don't get to spend Christmas with their family, whether they're working on that day or traveling on that day or whether they're away from home. And they have jobs far more important than babbling about sports on the radio. Okay, enough of the rant on that. Let's get to the react on the Commanders' schedule. I'll go through it game by game. There was, if you don't know, and you probably do know by now, and you even knew some of these games before the schedule came out at 8 o'clock last night, but lots of primetime action. In fact, the second game of the season is going to be what is essentially the first Thursday night game. The season will open September 4th, Cowboys and Eagles, but that's going to be on NBC. This will be the first prime game with Al Michaels and Kirk Herbstreit as they go to Green Bay. They have their first Monday night game, Week 6. In fact, it's the only Monday night game at this point. Could be flexed, still have the possibility of flexing into another one. But they'll play the Bears here, which is the rematch of the Hail Mary game from last year. They have a Sunday night game. No, they have a second. No, it's ABC. So it's a second Monday night game at Kansas City on October 27th. Then they go to play Seattle at home. That's a Sunday night game on NBC. And then you have the Lions game at home, 4:25. Very few 1 o'clocks these days. Dolphins game is in Madrid. So that's 9:30 in the morning. That works very, very well for me. The bye comes a little earlier this year than it has in recent years. It's week 12, so that'll be in the middle of November. And then they have Denver on a Sunday night game. They have, look at this, a 1 o'clock game at Minnesota, but that could be flexed in Week 14. The following week, they have a 1 o'clock game at the Giants, which could be flexed. They have a Saturday game against the Eagles. They play the Cowboys on Christmas Day, and then in that final weekend, depending on what it means in that game at Philadelphia, it'll either be Saturday or Sunday, and they'll just have to work out exactly what day and what time that's going to be. But no Monday night game in that final week. So Dan Quinn last night was on ESPN, and this is sort of a reward. It's the way you get rewarded in the NFL for a great season where you're coming off an appearance in the NFC Championship game, and not surprisingly, Quinn is like, yeah, giddy up, let's go.
I think the first thing you'd want to say, if you're a real competitor, that's the type of environment and arenas that you want to go battle in. Every team, man, every year we think of it as a 1-year shelf life, but the things that you carry over, the resilience, the toughness, and having this connectivity that our team has, there's definitely an energy that comes out of Commanders Park, the way we train and the way we do things. So to be a heavy hitter, you got to go through a schedule like this to go prove that. And we love to go prove it, man. That's the best competing there is.
Commanders Park. I'll never get used to that, but okay, yeah, I guess that's what it is. All forever. Actually, there used to be a little bit of a debate about this because I believe it was officially called Redskin Park. Redskin Park. The first one opened in 1971 when George Allen came here. That was a little closer to Dulles Airport. And the one that they're currently at in Ashburn opened in 1992. And I believe they always called it Redskin Park. But George Michael, and he did a bunch of shows around the team, he always called it Redskins Park. So, you had to either decide to go with George or go with what the name was. But Commanders Park is hard for me to get my head around. This is more from Quinn, and some of it is about the schedule, and some of it is about moving into year 2 and avoiding the old sophomore slump.
Well, I think, number one, it starts with Jayden, all this unseen work, man. The guy is absolutely relentless. And what I can say is our team, we appreciate that, man. He absolutely puts it in. So, like most things, man, there's tons of things that you want to go and get better for him, specifically some footwork things, but also a whole nother year, Dan, in the system. Think about the growth that you make doing that. And so for us to have Cliff and Tavita and David Blau and others that, surround Jayden, Marcus Mariota, those are really significant things too, man. So we love this guy. He is a rare competitor and an elite teammate.
Coach, it was clear that in the offseason, you and Adam Peters got together and you had a very definitive plan about how to help Jayden out. It's been some of the things that you wanted to do, especially on the offensive line, which I think you knocked out of the park, drafting of Trey Amos at corner. Talk a little bit about that plan and how you see it so far right now and how good you feel about it.
Yeah, and Adam, man, Louis, you know this. Adam, he's elite. And when the season ends in the postseason, you're not ready for that. But what I do remember sitting together, and we had maybe 14 or 15 free agents. And man, could we get a number of these guys back? How many possibly? We ended up getting 14 of the 15 back. And Louis, you know how hard that is to do. But I think it speaks to the environment that the players created in the locker room. They want to be part of this. They want to be down for one another here. So then to Adam to do some trades, adding in obviously Debo and Laramie on the offensive side, adding Josh through the draft. So I thought he was calculated, measured about how we would go and get better. And if we can, keep doing that, that's really what this offseason has been about for us to absolutely push it and see where we can take it. So it's been a blast. We've been together as an entire team just for the first week. The rookies came last weekend, and then we integrated them and onboarded everybody this week. So to have your whole crew together, man, as a coach, it's a cool feeling. It's like where the journey kind of officially starts.
How do you feel about playing the team that you battled in the NFC Championship game last year, twice in the last 3 weeks, in addition to being in Dallas, or at least hosting Dallas on Christmas Day? Yeah,
I thought bookending the schedule with the NFC East, starting it with week 1 and ending at week 18 at Philly. You guys know how much fun competing in these division games. So what are we talking about? Washington at Philly, week 18, that is ball, and we ain't even got to it yet. It's going to be loud and cold and everything that, the 6 of us on this call, man, that we love about football. So I think it's awesome. It's cool by the league. And then, to get to, kick off Christmas for everybody, we take that honor any day.
Coach, I remember in Atlanta, you guys would have sayings every training camp. I remember one year it was embrace the suck. This year we got Washington. You guys got to the NFC Championship game, but you know how that went. What's the saying?
Yes, I do, Peter.
What's the saying around Commanders right now, and what's the mantra, and what is the message as we head towards OTAs?
Yeah, I would say right now it's honestly us relentlessly pushing to get better. That's the players, that's the coaches, and finding those skills. And can you isolate those specific skills that you really want to nail? I love the competitive nature of who we are and building that connectivity together. We've added some new guys through it. So I've been more inclined to think the sayings, they come around, Peter, at the right times. And I think, we'll let those grow into it as the season comes. It's an awesome challenge. We're a unique team, and we love that about, being part of this crew and what we stand for. So we'll let it rip, man. We'll figure out, what those sayings are, at the appropriate time. But no preemptives on this end, unless you got something to throw out right now.
Yeah, you got anything for him? I got nothing.
I kind of like let it rip.
Let it rip does have a nice
that just fits with what you guys are going to do this year.
Let it rip is okay, but I liked what he said at his opening news conference last year when he was introduced. I like to do hard S with good people. I think that should be on a T-shirt, and that should be what the mantra is for this team forever. That's really what it's all about in any business, that you do hard things with good people and you have success. So all good so far. Now, here's where we get into what could possibly be a big round of fetching, not just the people who decide that it's too hard for them to watch a football game on Christmas, but the honeymoon is still in full effect. It's a wild love affair going on right now with what they did last year, but realistically, they're going to hit some bumps this year. They did last year. They had a 3-game losing streak, overcame that. But once again, and I will only be doing this as far as my plans go for only 2 more times after this. So this is the countdown for the end of what has been a fruitless exercise over the years, but I don't know, seemingly a necessary one in the sports radio business. Giants come to town for the opening game on September the 7th. It's not Daniel Jones. It's Russell Wilson. Remember, they lost to Russell Wilson at home last year with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think they find a way to win this game. Not going to be a blowout, but I think they beat the Giants in week 1. Then they go to Green Bay for the Thursday night game. Short week. Packers on the road. I think that's a loss. I think reality sets in a little bit here, and they're 1-1 coming home to play the Raiders, and yet another rarity to this season, 1 o'clock home game. I think they beat the Raiders in that game with Geno Smith. Then they go to Atlanta. Now, they had a really close game with Atlanta at the end of the season with Michael Penix making like a second start, maybe even first start. I forget, but it was pretty early on for him. And they beat them in a close game. I think they'll win. I think they'll win in Atlanta, but that's going to be a tough game. So they are 3-1 coming home or coming to the Chargers. So they played an East Coast game in week 4. Week 5, they have to go to the West Coast to play the Chargers, and I put that down as a loss. So they're 3-2 with the Bears coming in for a Monday night game. So they're coming back from the West Coast, extra day of rest. Bears, though, are coming off a bye. 4 teams this year Washington will play, all coming off byes. That's high for the league. They play the Bears week 6 off a bye, Seattle week 9 off a bye, Denver week 12 off a bye, and they go to the Giants in week 15 with the Giants coming off a bye. So that's going to be another thing to keep an eye on. All right, they beat the Bears. Bears come in. Maybe it's a close game again. No Hail Mary, but they find a way to win that game. Then they go to Dallas in week 7. Doesn't seem to matter. I mean, I've been watching this rivalry since the 60s. It doesn't seem to matter if one team is good and one team is bad, or they're both good or both bad. They always split. So I'm going to say the Cowboys win this game. Then they go to Kansas City. That's another loss. So now they've lost 3 out of their last 4. And, it's funny how things shift in sports. We've gone from, last year was kind of like Dayenu, would have been enough, to, oh, my God, what's happened here? This is a team we thought might get to the Super Bowl or at least give the Eagles a run for their money. What has happened here? They lost 3 of their last 4. Relax. They beat Kansas. They beat Seattle in week 9. Then they go back. They stay home, so it's back-to-back home games. They got the Lions coming here. I think they beat the Lions again. I know the Lions are going to be really riled up after what happened in the playoffs last year, but I think they beat the Lions here. Then they play the Dolphins in week 11. That'll be in Spain. No bye before it. They got the bye afterwards, so that'll help a little bit, but they're playing in Spain. I think they beat the Dolphins there, even though that's technically a Dolphins home game. The bye is week 12. Then they got Denver
which is on November 30th, a Sunday night game that's here. I think they win that. They go to Minnesota. They win, so they're on kind of a roll here. Then they beat the Giants in New York, even though the Giants are coming off a bye. So that's 4 straight wins. Eagles come here, and that's a Saturday game. They lose to the Eagles. 5 days later, they got the Cowboys, but at least it's at home. They beat the Cowboys on Christmas. Then, sort of a mini bye before they go to Philadelphia. And I think that could really wind up being a coin flip because the Eagles, you really don't, and this is, again, when we do these schedule predictions, we don't know what's going to happen. Every team is an ACL away from disaster, so you don't know what's going to happen. Or the Eagles have just run away with things, and they're resting everybody. They got nothing to play for, and Washington needs the game to clinch, and they win the game because the Eagles are resting everybody. Or the Eagles have something to play for, including the first-round bye, and they beat Washington. They're a better team right now, even with all the improvements that Washington has made. And the Eagles losing a few players to free agency, Eagles are still a better team. So I could see them losing both games to Philadelphia, but finishing with a 10-7 record. A 10-7 record. It's not 12-5 like last year, but it's a tougher schedule. You're playing all these night games. You're playing on short weeks several times. The second game of the year is on a short week. They're playing the Cowboys on a short week. They've got 2 Monday night games. Even Sunday night shortens the week a little bit. So, let's realistically look at this season and say it's going to be more of a struggle to get to the postseason than it was last year. And last year they didn't clinch until the second to last week of the season, right? I mean, the Dallas win at the end was kind of gravy, and they rested Jaden Daniels in the second half. But they are facing 9 quarterbacks who finished in the top 14 in passer rating last year. Now, anything can change, including performance drop-off, not just injury. So who knows what we're going to be looking at once we get to the end of the season, to Week 18. But I have once again properly executed the duty of the office of this job, and that is to go through this schedule game by game and give you a season prediction, which mine is 10-7. And if you take that to the bank, you're a fool. As the health secretary said yesterday, no one should listen to my medical advice. No one should listen to my prediction advice. All right, coming up, more from the Capitals as they get ready for Game 5 tonight, trying to keep the season alive. A couple of thoughts from Tom Wilson, and a lot of react to the Pete Rose story. Don Van Natta, who broke the story that Rose would become eligible for consideration for the Hall of Fame, he was on Rich Eisen yesterday and laid out how it all happened, and also a thought of maybe not waiting for the special committee in December of 2027 and ramping it up now so it's possible there could be a vote really soon on Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
You may have heard me say this before. I had a professor in college who used to like to say, figures don't lie, but liars figure. And when you start looking at numbers for matchups and things like that, I mean, they tell you something to some degree, but when you actually get out on the court, on the ice, on the field, who knows what they mean. But Caps with their backs against the wall, Spencer Carberry, Capitals coach, has led his team to a 25-8-1 record after losses. Well, they just lost Game 4. Okay, great. Right? Well, it didn't work in Game 4, so they lost their second straight in Carolina. And this is it. They got to win tonight, or that's it. Season's over. If they win, they still got to win 2 more, and they would go to Carolina on Saturday. So it's a pretty bleak situation, but these are the kind of things that you always hear in this type of situation, like this from Tom Wilson.
We believe in here. I mean, we know what this team can do. We've been one of the best teams in the league all year. Starts with one game. We've won one game plenty of times. So, we're going to, you ask my job. My job is to go out there and play my game and try and lead the way the best that I can. And, everybody in here, when we're playing the same way and the right way, it's a tough team to beat. So we're confident in our group. we've had resiliency kind of all year. We love each other in here, and we just want to go out there and leave it all out there and start to slowly try and push them out of the series.
Yeah, and from what I'm not a hockey guy, but from what I observe in playoffs, once the tide turns, it can completely turn. The problem, and this is just a novice eye watching these 4 games so far, is that Carolina seems to be playing a different kind of game than the Capitals are, and they're much better at it. And the Capitals aren't great at stopping it. And, a lot of shots on net, obviously. You don't have to know much to realize that. And the ability to keep it in the Caps' end the whole time, or most of the time, all that adds up. So it's going to be tough. But, Wilson, the veteran guy, really the heart and soul of the team at this point. There's more from him.
It's a close group. So when you talk about resiliency, it means being able to look at the guy next to you and knowing that, tomorrow night we're going to get his A game, and I think that's a cool thing, and I have no doubt with this group that the guys sitting on either side of me and across from me is going to bring everything they have, and we're going to do our best to show up and fight. And if we do that, we're confident we're gonna make some noise and start with 1.
We'll get to what Spencer Carberry said at his news conference yesterday at 10 o'clock. The Pete Rose story still has legs a couple days later, and it's playing out in reaction pretty much the way it has played out summer after summer when we've saddled this up on sports radio. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame? Well, until this week, he's been ineligible to be considered for the Hall of Fame. Now that's not the case. So it steps up to another level. And I've seen plenty of people, including baseball purists, who say, yeah, okay, it was a lifetime ban. His life is over. He had more hits than anybody else. Let's put him in. And there's big pushback from people like Bob Nightingale, who's covered the game for a long time. Stephanie Epstein, who writes really good stuff for SI.com, says this is a disgrace. Sally Jenkins has a column about it today in which she says, contrary to the convenient illogic of MLB Commissioner Rob Manfred, dead people can certainly damage the integrity of baseball. Reputation survives death, protests John Dowd, who wrote the original report on Rose's gambling and bitterly contests Manfred's decision to make him eligible. So there's that. And I would be very interested to talk to John Dowd about this because his report, and if you read it, I mean, it was slam dunk that Pete was betting on baseball, and he spent 15 years denying it. There was also, about 10 years ago, a report from ESPN where they had betting slips from Rose as a player. So, now he was a player manager his last couple of years, I think, or I guess 80. The year he broke the record, which is 85, and then I think he played again in 86 where he was the manager. But more from Sally. She says, the dead men required the aid of a weak living commissioner, Manfred, who shortly after a conversation with Rose's pal, President Donald Trump, suddenly reversed himself on all he had previously written and believed. In his ruling declaring formerly banned individuals posthumously eligible, he ludicrously unreasoned, a person no longer with us cannot represent a threat to the integrity of the game. In fact, dead people can still do damage, Sally writes, a lot of it because the ghosts of their power to debase. To wrongly memorialize these guys is kind of a counterfeit that cheapens all Hall of Fame inductions. And that's certainly a valid argument. Now, let's go back to how this all started. Don Van Natta is the one who broke the story, great investigative reporter for ESPN, has done a lot of reporting on Rose over the years. And he was on with Rich Eisen yesterday to explain how this came about. And it came about, I think, as Sally alludes to there, very shortly after this Donald Trump meeting. And I go back to what Bob Costas said a couple of weeks ago with Dan Patrick, that it's possible that Trump went in the room and he lobbied openly for Rose to get in the Hall of Fame with one of his obnoxious tweets. But he also may have said, hey, you got a lot of guys here on work visas playing Major League Baseball. It would be a shame if we decided to send them back to their countries. So I think that may have played into it as well. Don't know that, just speculating, just going off what Costa said. This is Van Natta laying out how it all came together.
Well, Jeffrey Lenkoff, the lawyer for Pete Rose and the Rose family, had been pushing for this since 2015. This is a long time coming. And I think people have overlooked that Rob Manfred had an opportunity to put Pete Rose back into baseball in December of 2015. Manfred met with Rose. Rose lied to Manfred in that meeting. Rose said to Manfred, "I'm not betting on baseball anymore," when in fact he was. He corrected himself. And for that reason, Manfred rejected that reinstatement application. So as Lenkoff says, this was a long time coming, but obviously the decision coming 7 months after Pete's death at the age of 83 last September has raised eyebrows. Why did Manfred wait so long? Rose predicted repeatedly in the last few years of his life, including with an interview that I did with him back in 2019 for ESPN, that it was very likely that he was going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame after his death. And he said, "What good does that do me? How am I going to know? I mean, the Hall of Fame is for Pete to have a single day in Cooperstown." And the timing of it certainly raises questions. I think if you were to ask the commissioner would say Rose was his own worst enemy, and the door was open slightly to Rose getting back into baseball multiple times, going back to 2015, again in 2022 when he had a visit in Philadelphia and said some things that upset a lot of people at that event in August of 2022. And the commissioner and the people around him would say that Rose really did this to himself. But the decision now, 7 months after the fact, and the decision that Manfred made, which is historic, it's unprecedented, saying anybody who is on an ineligible list is off the list at the time of their death. Of course, it affects Shoeless Joe Jackson most notably, who certainly deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, as does Pete Rose, is really noteworthy.
So
and important.
So I guess then why now, right? Why announce it here in the middle of May of 2025, Don?
Last December, on December 17th, Manfred in his office in Midtown Manhattan met with Jeffrey Lenkoff, the Rose lawyer, and Fawn Rose, Rose's daughter. And that's really where the momentum started growing. Again, 3 months after Pete Rose's death. And then on January 8th, Lenkoff filed that petition. And I think finally, Manfred, who comes to decisions painstakingly slow, as we know, it took him years to adapt the pitch clock and all sorts of rules changes that have certainly turbocharged fan interest in Major League Baseball. He was very, very slow to coming to this decision, too, and finally made it yesterday. To your point, it does appear as if it's scripted, right? That on the eve of Pete Rose night, at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati, where Rose's lawyer will be and his family will be, this decision comes down. That's certainly very, very curious. And of course, the Reds playing the White Sox, the opponents in the 1919 World Series that was fixed by the Black Sox is certainly curious. But Manfred, I had reported back in 2020, Rich, that Manfred, for all intents and purposes, believed that once you pass away, you're no longer on the ineligible list. I broke that story for ESPN in January of 2020. Again, why it took Rob Manfred, 5 years and a few months to come to that decision, it raises the question of whether MLB really didn't want Rose to have a day in Cooperstown. And now finally after his death, it's looking like he might get one.
Well, maybe on Pete Rose night with the White Sox in after this announcement in Cincinnati, Don, they should have some sort of ceremony where there's official reinstatement for Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson after 2 2/3 innings. They stopped the game because at that point in time, the White Sox will have had 8 men out. Don, right? Like we can,
I like that.
Like let's keep going.
Excellent.
Let's keep going. If these decisions are made for marketing purposes, let's just keep going, right? We'll have 8
I like
men
that,
out.
Rich. That's a great idea. Yeah. The John Sayles movie. Let's get that.
It's
let's
so
get
awesome.
that back. It's such a great movie. I love that movie. Yeah, we both love it. We've talked about it. Yeah, it's fantastic.
And I was talking to my baseball nut of a 14-year-old son last night about all of this when he's like, "Dad, was Shoeless Joe Jackson good?" And I couldn't basically say, other than the fact that yes, he was great, and he should be in the Hall of Fame. I couldn't point out to him that one of the reasons why he should be in the Hall of Fame is the World Series he was accused of helping throw. He hit .375, the only home run of the World Series, didn't commit an error. He's like the worst tanker in the history, worst guy on the take in the history of guys on the take. You know what I mean?
That's right.
So
that's right. He had 12 hits, and he played his heart out. And there has been a campaign for years, going back to the 90s in particular, for Shoeless Joe Jackson. The legislature in South Carolina was petitioning Major League Baseball. This is a footnote that a lot of people don't realize. So John Dowd, who did the Rose investigation, the famous Dowd report, also was asked by Bart Giamatti to investigate Shoeless Joe Jackson, of whether Giamatti should take Jackson off the ineligible list. And Dowd concluded absolutely he should, and recommended that to Giamatti before he did the Rose investigation. And Giamatti didn't choose to do that. All these years later, finally, Shoeless Joe will get his opportunity. But no one deserves it more than Shoeless Joe and Pete Rose getting plaques in the Hall of Fame. Jackson hit .356. It's the fourth best batting average in MLB history. And obviously Rose, the all-time hit king, so many records. He liked to say that he was the winningest person to ever play professional sports in American history. He won 1,972 games. 56 hits. I mean, everything about Rose. And just Charlie Hustle, the greatest nickname probably in all of sports.
Yeah, you can hear Van Natta is clearly in favor of seeing Shoeless Joe and Rose in the Hall of Fame. And there are others who agree with that. I find that last part really fascinating, that John Dowd was asked to investigate Shoeless Joe for the ineligible list. Yes, he was banned from baseball, but he was not banned from the Hall of Fame because, again, at the time that Pete Rose was getting that lifetime ban from Bart Giamatti, who sadly died a week later, Giamatti said at the news conference, I will be interested to see how you guys, meaning the sports writers, vote on him when he becomes eligible. Because when he banned Rose from baseball, he'd only been retired as a player for 3 years. He needed to wait 2 more years for eligibility. And the bat was taken out of the writers' hands. And I remember they were angry about this because I worked with some of them at UPI. They were pissed off that they wouldn't have the opportunity to vote yes or no on Pete Rose. And that was a ruling that came down from the Hall of Fame, not from Major League Baseball, but from the Hall of Fame for the ineligible list. So I'm not so sure why it was important for Giamatti to have something definitive on Shoeless Joe, whether he stayed on the ineligible list or not. I mean, the Hall of Fame, that was inconsequential at that point. Now, he had been out of baseball for so long. By 1989, he'd been out close to 70 years. So I guess it's possible that he looked at it like, well, maybe we should think about how we do it with Shoeless Joe, so as how we do it with Pete Rose. I don't know, but it wouldn't have made any difference had he been considered by the Veterans Committee at that point, because he was not banned from the Hall of Fame. He was just on baseball's ineligible list. Very important. By the way, that was yesterday before Pete Rose night at the Great American Ballpark last night. And yes, they did have an enormous crowd there, 43,000 plus. The daughter of Pete Rose, Fawn Rose, spoke. She said, Rob Manfred was gracious and kind. Quote, really gave me a forum to talk about my dad, not the baseball player, but the father, the grandfather, and what he means to the fans of Cincinnati. Well, he wasn't a great father because while he had 2 young children when he was in his 30s, he was, as he admitted, having an affair with a teenage girl who he claims was of age of consent at the age of 16 when he had sex with her. And then there's some question as to whether she was 16 or not. Anyway, Pete Rose's son, Petey, he appeared in 11 games with Cincinnati. I think was sort of a favorite of Pete, 1997. Said he was angry when he first heard about Manfred's decision because he couldn't call his father. Well, there's that. But one thing that was said by Terry Francona, the manager of the Reds, and I don't necessarily agree with this, but he's got some bias since he played with Pete Rose, and Pete Rose was his manager at the end of his playing career, with Cincinnati. He said, quote about Rose, if he's not in, there's no Hall of Fame. But I get it. There's some things that happened. I'm glad I don't have to make those decisions. Played baseball with as much passion and competitive enjoyment as he ever could. You wanted to be on his team. I think everybody pretty much said that about him. And if you're talking about, and that's the great dichotomy here. I think that's the appropriate word, in that you had someone who on the field celebrated the integrity of the game more than anyone else. Nobody played harder than Pete Rose. Nobody wanted to win more than Pete Rose. And when you go to a game, you root for your team to win. And if you got somebody like Pete Rose playing his butt off every night, that's a great thing. On the other hand, he broke the cardinal rule that screwed with the integrity of the game, and he bet on baseball. Yeah, he always bet on his team to win, but he bet on baseball. And that is part of the complicated legacy of Pete Rose. All right, coming up, more on the Capitals as they get ready for Game 5 tonight, and more on Pete Rose. Nobody knows Pete Rose better than Johnny Bench, and he had a long conversation about this with, excuse me, Dan Patrick yesterday. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. I don't think anybody knew Pete Rose better than Johnny Bench. They were teammates forever. Johnny Bench is the best catcher to have ever played the game. Pete Rose had more hits than anybody. Bench thinks that Rose should be in the Hall of Fame, but Frank Robinson, who is a better player than both of them. No, he didn't have the most hits, and maybe he wasn't the best outfielder of all time, but he's a top 10, maybe even top 5 baseball player of all time. And he said Pete Rose got in the Hall of Fame, he would never, ever visit Cooperstown again. Sadly, Frank Robinson is gone as well. But very interesting stuff laid out by Bench yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and we'll play some of that coming up. Capitals trying to stay alive tonight. Kind of a familiar scenario, as some say, at this time of year. They're down 3-1. They've overcome 3-1 twice, so it can be done, but they've also blown 3-1 leads 5 times. The mindset going into this, Spencer Carberry has done an excellent job in his 2 seasons as coach. They sprinted to the end, got to the playoffs last year, and were swept, and that was a victory. And then this year, expectations not really all that high. And again, a lot of the focus was on getting Alex Ovechkin the record. Well, they did that, and they had the best record in the East. And now their backs against the wall, and they have gone out and blowing a 3-1 lead when they won the President's Cup. So it's not necessarily what you do in the regular season. And you might say, well, the choking aspect of this may have gone out the window because they won their first round series against Montreal. Maybe there's that. But this is his mindset and the team's mindset as they go into a do-or-die game tonight.
We don't really look at it big picture-wise. It's just one game. So there's the starting point is just winning one hockey game, and then what gives us confidence that we can do that. We've done it in this series. We've been a great hockey team all year long. We've been a good home team all year long. So that's really where the confidence is drummed up for is winning one hockey game on home ice.
Yeah, like the Red Sox said after overcoming 3-0 against the Yankees, don't let us win one. Don't let us win tonight. As far as coming back from adversity and being in this spot and managing to claw your way out of it, here's what encourages Spencer Carberry about this team.
At times, I know a lot of people will look at adversity through the year as wins and losses, but I felt like as a group internally that we've dealt with our fair share of quote-unquote adversity, of struggling with our game a little bit, not looking as good as we would like to, even though maybe we found a way to grind out some wins that if you weren't looking under the hood, you'd be, oh, that was a really good stretch from the Caps, where internally we're looking and saying we haven't been very good, we're searching for solutions, we're trying to find answers and play better. And so you're going through some speed bumps through that. I think towards the end of the year, there was some things we learned about each other as a group, of digging in when we needed to. Actually, when it was like, okay, let's see our best on display right now. There was multiple times where our group stepped up. I think leaning in scenarios of high pressured, I wouldn't put the O chase in, but I would put in situations where, you lose a game and you don't play very well at all, and the response to that. So I think our team has been pretty mentally tough all year long in all different situations, even though if you're going to point to a 6-game losing streak, didn't happen, right? If you're using that as the only criteria, then we haven't. But I look at a bunch of different things that I look as speed bumps, as adversity that we've been through as a group.
So there's that. And then there's this, which really hasn't been talked about, but this was at the end of the news conference yesterday. 4 years ago, Carberry was the coach of the minor league team in Hershey. They had the best regular season record, didn't win the Cup. They went on to win the Cup either a year later or 2 years later. So a lot of these guys on the Capitals now, the younger players, they have won. They have won a championship, not at the NHL level, but at the minor league level. And, you know, that's part of the process. I remember this when I was in San Antonio and we had the AA team from the Dodgers. Now, in those days, guys were really backed up. There was free agency in baseball when I was there. This was 79 to 81, and you could move on. But that infield for the Dodgers with, you know, Say and Lopes and Garvey and Bill Russell, they stayed together forever. So if you were an infielder in the Dodgers minor league system, you weren't going anywhere. Steve Sachs got a call-up, and he went on to have a pretty good career with them. But a lot of guys got backed up there, and what happened was you had players who were on really good teams. And the Dodgers AAA team in Albuquerque and the team in San Antonio, they were winning teams. They were getting in the playoffs. The San Antonio team, in the couple of years I was there, didn't win the championship, but they were a good team. And that can sometimes help you when you get to the NHL level, that you've been a part of a winning team in a winning organization, and you take that mindset when you get to the NHL, and that's something that Carberry addressed yesterday.
A lot of people all year long have asked a lot of questions about our quote-unquote rebuild, young players coming in. Wow, how has Washington been able to do it on the fly like this without drafting in the top 5, without bottoming out? That reason right there of having players, young players especially, play long playoff runs in the minors, I think is a huge part of it. And Hershey and our organization has taken a lot of pride in making sure that not only there's young prospects in Hershey, but also veteran players that can help equip a group to be able to potentially, does not guarantee it, but potentially go on long playoff runs. So Alexi Protas, so Mikey, so those type of players get opportunities. Ethan Frank, I mean, I know there's still guys down there, Hendrix Lapierre, Ivan Miroshnichenko, those guys getting opportunities to play into April and May, so valuable. Because now you look at Pro and Mikey, they're about to play in a game where our season's on the line, home ice. They've been in some of these situations, not exactly the same, but they've prepared for this moment. They've been in a winner-take-all game. They've played for a Calder Cup championship on the road in a hostile environment. So all those little experiences just add to your tool bag and just prepare you a little bit more for when that moment comes at the National Hockey League level, which will come tomorrow night for those guys.
Tomorrow night, now tonight. It could mean something, or it may mean nothing. We'll find out at 7 o'clock tonight when the two teams take the ice. There's a report from Pete Thamel, who covers college sports for ESPN, that Maryland is going to hire a new athletic director. You know, they've been without one since Damon Evans left at the end of the season. His name is Jim Smith. Jim Smith. That's a name that some people might write in a hotel registry. But anyway, he's with the Atlanta Braves. He's also worked in the NFL, and he's worked in Major League Soccer, and he's worked at Ohio State. And now more than ever in college sports, you have to have somebody coming from a pro model. I don't think the traditional route where they would get athletic directors who go from college to college is the way to do it anymore. So this is probably the way to go. I'm not familiar with him at all. I don't know what his job is with the Atlanta Braves, but Braves have been a very successful organization over the years. They've signed their young stars to long-term contracts. I think 3 years ago they won the World Series. They're good organization, and I think that's a smart thing to do. Now the Damon Evans thing, whenever that's fully revisited, if it is, and if Buzz Williams goes on and does a great job and they get back to the Sweet 16 or further this next season, then, you know, all is forgiven. But what a mess that was at the end of the season. Things move so quickly, and we've moved to the excitement about the stadium, about the NFL draft coming here in a couple of years. We just had the schedule release, which gets more hype probably than it should have, but it did. And then you got the Caps in the playoffs. You got the disappointment of the Wizards winding up with the 6th pick. All those things have taken the attention away. It wasn't that long ago that we were obsessing about what was going on in Maryland as they were going to the Sweet 16 with, Kevin Willard essentially using as an excuse, although he wanted out, he wanted to go to a place where basketball got the bulk of the money. That wasn't going to happen in a Big Ten school. That football, that's the way it works, and football brings in more money from television. So he went off to a school where football is very secondary at Villanova. You say very secondary? No, just secondary. You don't need the qualifier there. Just secondary. And he got what he wanted. But he said, and this was not a done deal yet, he said, well, looks like Damon Evans is going to go to SMU, so I don't know who I'm dealing with. It sounded to me at the time like he was saying, oh, yeah, let's get rid of Damon Evans so I can negotiate with somebody else. I can get what I want. Because he clearly wasn't getting what he wanted from the school. And they had last-minute negotiations. They tried to give him what he wanted. They even gave him what he wanted. He still left. So, this is an unusual situation. It happens from time to time. But usually when an athletic director comes in and the coach is in place, the coach has been in place for a while. And this was part of the problem at Maryland when Debbie Yow was there, that Gary Williams had been there for a while and had already established himself as a great coach, brought the program back from the dead when they went on probation. And Gary and Debbie Yow butted heads for the whole time that they were together. And I think it was Gary's intention to last an extra year, which he did. He waited until she left, and then there was a new athletic director in place, and that's when he decided to retire. But in this case, you've got a basketball coach who's been in place for a couple of months, not hired by the new, and apparently this will be the case. There should be an announcement soon. Jim Smith, who comes from the Atlanta Braves, and we'll see where that goes. Wanted to mention the Giannis talk, and this is the state of the NBA. There was reported the other day by Shams Charania that Giannis Antetokounmpo is, quote, open-minded about playing someplace else than the Milwaukee Bucks. It's crazy how the NBA works in that a star player can decide whether or not he wants to stay where he is, and if he doesn't, he can decide where he wants to go and who he wants to take with him. But there's a report now in The Athletic from Sam Amick that Giannis's dream target is the Golden State Warriors. We're kind of wheezing to the end here. Steph was hurt, and they got eliminated last night by Minnesota. Whether they'd have won that series if Steph was healthy, we would see. But he's at an age where his body's breaking down. He's played a long time. He's been in the league since 2009, I believe. So 16 years. Played a lot of basketball there. And you got Draymond with gray in his beard. Clay is gone, and they've added Jimmy Butler. But Jimmy Butler is making the same money as Giannis. So if they make a deal, if they trade, Jimmy Butler's older. Giannis is turning 31 in December, so he's 30 years old now. He's very much in the prime and probably has another 6 or 7 good years left in him. But this is what Sam Amick is reporting in The Athletic. Antetokounmpo has been known to be a dream target of the Warriors for a long time, made a late-night appearance at Steph Curry's party in San Francisco during All-Star Weekend. Warriors officials on hand took a gleeful look, including a fellow attendee, Golden State owner Joe LaCob. Draymond Green, Kevin Looney, also part of the get-together as well. Giannis and Steph, it should be noted, are both represented by the same Octagon agency. Still, it was a Warriors-centric event with one notable and very large exception. While Golden State is deeply invested in Jimmy Butler at the moment, the reality about a player like Antetokounmpo is his greatness could compel nearly every GM and owner in the league to adjust their plan. Just a couple of months from now, Butler will be eligible to be traded again, so it just so happens that he and Giannis are going to be in the same year and the same amount of money next year. Giannis is 5 years younger and has only played in 67 games this season, more than Butler has played in a season since 2016-2017. Wow. So obviously that's a trade Warriors would like to make. Would the Bucks do it? I thought back to this, and this is not exactly what happened with the Lakers in the 2003-2004 season, but it's somewhat similar in that you had a pairing that was coming to the end for reasons other than age and money. It was that Kobe and Shaq realized they couldn't play together anymore. They had won the 3 straight championships from 2000 to 2002. They didn't win in 2003. And so they're now facing the aging part of the team because they got older players on it as well. And you've got Kobe and Shaq for one last hurrah because one of them is going to go at the end of the season. The L.A. wasn't big enough for the two of them, and it turned out that Shaq left and went to Miami and won a championship there. But they signed 2 guys who were ring shopping, older guys. One of them was Karl Malone, who had played 18 years with the Utah Jazz, now in his 19th season at the age of 40, gave them something. He gave the Lakers 13 points and 8 rebounds. That's, well below his career averages of 25 and 10. And Gary Payton, who was 35 years old, who had spent 13 years in Seattle, gave them 14 points and 5 assists that season. That's below his career averages of 16 and 7. They wound up getting eliminated in the finals by the Pistons in 5. So that last hurrah kind of thing where they bring in these 2 old geezers who don't have rings, who've been to finals but never could get over the hump against, both of them lost to Michael Jordan and the Bulls in the finals. Now they're one chance. Jordan's out of the league. He'd retired the year before after playing 2 years with the Wizards. Not that he was going to be a factor with the Wizards, but they add Payton and Malone, and they think, okay, if they got anything left, they know how to win in the postseason, and they did. They got to the finals, but the ultimate goal of getting them a ring and one last for Shaq in Los Angeles before. And I think even if that team won, Shaq was going to go because he and Kobe could not get along anymore, and the Pistons beat him in 5. So this would be, it's hard to believe that it's been 9 years since Kevin Durant went to the Warriors, back-to-back titles. They had 73 wins that year he signed with them, but they had lost to Cleveland in the finals. And they add arguably the best player in the game to an already great trio. And though Durant was the MVP in 2 of those championships, the 2 championships that they won with him, they still had a team that probably could have won without him. But in this case, if Steph's got anything left, if Draymond's got anything left, and they add Giannis with what they've got in other complementary parts, we'll see. But this is the game that's now played in the NBA. It's not like sorry, you got a contract, either you play or you don't play. Nah, here's where I want to go, and here's who I want to take with me. Okay, we can do that. And what about the salary cap? I know it's flexible, but forget the salary cap. Of course, if you're replacing Butler's salary with Giannis's salary, I guess it makes sense. But he's got his ring. It's not like, when LeBron made his decision 15 years ago to go to Miami, where he said, I don't want to be 30 years old with a bad knee and no rings. He's got his ring, and he is 30. And he doesn't have a bad knee. So we'll see where that goes. So Johnny Bench, who seems to be fairly regular on the Dan Patrick Show, still has his fastball. Johnny's getting up there. A great, great catcher. Maybe the greatest catcher of all time. You might be able to make a case for Yogi Berra, but I would say Johnny Bench is regarded as the best ever offensively and defensively. And he was very close with Pete Rose. They were teammates forever, part of the Big Red Machine. 1975, 1976, back-to-back World Series championships. They had business ventures together. They had a television show together at one point. And Bench has been, he's been fair, I think, about Rose. He hasn't really been stumping for him to get into the Hall of Fame. But now that he's been removed from the ineligible list, Bench is in line with Rob Manfred in that Rose now does deserve the chance to be considered by the committee for induction into the Hall of Fame, as he told Dan Patrick yesterday.
I think he's done more work than you can imagine to try to figure this out. I think it had to be agreed upon by the Hall of Fame, though. I think that was a question mark that had to be done. Jane is the person that's basically, wants the sanctification of the Hall of Fame, and that it hopefully all members of the Hall of Fame, although we know there's been question marks about it, whether it be PEDs or whether it be past history or people that have been elected to the Hall of Fame. But for the commissioner, I know personally that I've talked to him. I know there's others that have talked to him. I know that he's trying to get the temperature of what it was. I think the temperature was mixed. I think like the voting is 61%. I think the percentages were one way or the other with some Hall of Famers. Do you take a poll of the Hall of Famers? Do you take a poll of the writers? Do you take a poll of just the Danettes? And I think you're going to wind. Well, I mean, they're fans, and
Yes.
they understand the what has happened with Pete and with the Black Sox scandals. I mean, the one person. I mean, as you know, Ted Williams was a staunch supporter of Shoeless Joe Jackson, and they keep saying, well, there was no evidence against it, and he hit 3-something or 400. So I guess the feel is, all I can say is it is a perfect time for this thing to come out, because right now, as we prepare for the day, I am not in Cincinnati, but they are honoring Pete at the stadium. There'll be 42,000 people coming out, and maybe more now that this announcement has been done. But for the Rose family, I'm extremely happy for them that it's all somewhat behind us.
Why wait until Pete dies?
Well, I think that there was some concern that he wanted to get into the game of baseball, as far as what has been talked about. He wanted to still be a manager or something like that. I think that created some problems. The fact that whether somebody would actually hire him at this point, or what position he would be in. And I think there was still, okay, we still have to have a certain caution here. We got to put up some yellow flags, and in most cases, a lot of red flags, and make sure that none of this happens. I really believe it was a push by so many people. I think the commissioners ruled on it twice. I know Bud Selig ruled on it 2 or 3 times, and the consensus was that he was not going to. He was permanently banned. And so I think they're cutting hairs a little bit on whether, now that he's deceased, now it's okay.
You probably know this better than anybody. How do you think Pete would react today if he were alive?
About damn time. What took him so long? About damn time. No, I think he wanted to be voted on. I think he felt like he never had that opportunity and everything else. And I think that was his one thing. I think he always believed that had he been on the ballot, that he would have been voted into the Hall of Fame. Now, what the Hall of Fame has not done, I think, is make a space for Pete in the Hall. And, we honor different groups of baseball players. We honor catchers, we honor we honor the heroes and what is baseball and legends and everything else. I think it's a perfect spot for the Hall of Fame so many ways. And I think you'll see it in Cincinnati on the board today. I think they'll highlight all the things and the person that he was. 145 pounds. He was not drafted. He had to have a scout, which was an uncle, to give him a tryout. Then he winds up being an all-star at 5 different positions. Then he wins the MVP of the World Series. These are all things that you can honor him with and praise him for. And I think I heard Mike Schmidt talking about the fact that, and the other players on MLB talking about the fact that they wanted to be like Pete. They wanted to play like Pete. They wanted to head first slide. They wanted to do all things. He was a personification of hustle and attitude and love for the game of baseball. And the rules are the rules. But for Pete, I think he should be honored at the Hall of Fame just with video. But you also tell the story of why this happened and what the ramifications are.
I think the immediate reaction from a lot of people was Pete's going to get into the Hall of Fame. And I'd caution my audience to say they're not going to vote on this till December of 2027. And there's other guys on that ballot like Steve Garvey and Louis Tiant and, some really good players. Shoeless Joe Jackson's going to be on there as well. So it's not a foregone conclusion Pete gets in. or even gets on the ballot. But, it's going to be a process here, and people should realize that.
I think we can assume that his name will be there. I think there's going to be the need for that to happen. But I think there's guys, they've been on, some of these guys have been on the ballot for 20 years. I mean, they keep thinking, or they'll think. And, famous words of Frank Robinson and Bob Feller, and this isn't for the good, this is for the great. And so, and that is exactly the way it was framed. And so here we are at this point saying, okay, we know Pete Rose is great. Good gosh, he's 4,256 hits, and, all the teams that he helped in all the World Series, we know it's there. But I think that would be the ultimate honor. But again, we're going to take 12 or 16 guys. We're going to take 4 owners. We're going to take 4 media, and we're going to take 8 players. And we're going to have to get 12 votes. And, Marvin Miller didn't make it in forever because the owners were never going to vote for him because they felt like during the drug situation, he could have controlled that better. And yet he had to allow players to get off of the drugs before they could test them. And that's why it took long that. And you could also say that Sosa and the PEDs and McGuire saved the game of baseball. All of these things are suppositions. All these things are not proven, but all these things are true. And so now you got to get 12 guys to go to 16 guys to go into a room, and you got to have 12 yeses.
Talking to Johnny Bench, the Hall of Famer, do you think Pete bet as a baseball player on baseball?
I don't have that knowledge. For me to say yes, I think that would be a little. I can't say for sure because I don't have any evidence of that.
Yeah, I just maintain, and once again, Pete and I shared a bookie growing up when Pete Rose. I went through a bookie that he used, so I never knew anything about Pete betting as a player. But I don't think you start betting as a manager. And let's be fair to the situation here, because everybody said, well, he bet as a manager and he bet on his team to win. I think there's more information there that hasn't.
Did he bet on them every game to win?
He told me a couple of years ago, first time he ever admitted that he bet on the Reds to win. Now, I was under the impression he was betting on them to win every night.
All right. Well, so Dan, you're standing beside him, and you're listening to him calling his bookie, and he says, "I want the Reds, the Indians, and the Braves." You'd stand by him the next night. He wants the Reds, the Yankees, and the Dodgers. And the next night he says, "I want the Pirates, the Cubs, and the Yankees." You don't like the Reds tonight?
Okay.
Dan's going to be calling the bookie.
But Johnny, I was told by somebody who would know there were certain pitchers that Pete didn't want to bet on to win games for the Reds.
Okay. And so you had a lot of conversations. Did you have a private line?
I had too many conversations. But I would know during hockey season or football season who Pete was betting on through my bookie, who took, some of the off bets from the main bookie who lived in Indian Hills, and that Pete went through. So I was kind of privy to this. I get to ESPN. I walk in. First month I'm there, the Pete Rose scandal breaks. I call my former bookie. I'm like, I need some information here. And my bookie's like, no names. I said, no, just give me the information. And he did.
Well, it's like gambling becomes yours. It's like you. This is a story. I'll just use you as the example. You bet on every baseball game, you bet on every football game, and you bet on every basketball game, and you lose every bet. So you call your bookie in Indian Hill and say, "I'm quitting. I am done with betting. I am not going to bet anymore." But then he'll say, "Well, what about hockey? It's just coming up." And you'll say, "What do I know about hockey?"
Well, Pete had that satellite dish outside his house, so he would dial up all of these. He'd be watching Vancouver Canucks and betting hockey.
Oh, I can still remember. Well, yeah, I mean, you got a tip. Somebody gave you a good tip.
Oh, yeah.
Back in the 73 or 4, we're up at we're having an event with Bob Hope, and my buddy who likes to bet, and he's watching the baskets, and the game's coming on. He's watching football, and the game's come on. He says, "Do you think I could be all right with Mr. Hope if I watched the game?" I said, "Well, I'm not turning. It's not my TV. I mean, it's his suite here. You're going to have to do that." And he said, "Mr. Hope, do you like football?" And of course, he had his book open to whatever his bets were. So Bob said, "Oh yeah, turn it on. Let's see what this. I got 4 points on this guy." So I think everybody's probably had a bet at one time or the other.
Have you?
I have. Somebody said if you'll bet on every home favorite, you'll win. So I tried it for about 6 games. I couldn't, I said, no, it's not my deal. I'm not lucky at gambling, and I love my money more.
I feel the same way. I feel that the pain of losing outweighs the joy of winning. So I'm not much of a bettor. I have bet, and I've been to Vegas a few times and like to do that. But no, I'm not caught all up in that. As far as Johnny's saying that he doesn't know if he bet on baseball as a player. He may not, but I remember this report. It was 10 years ago by ESPN, and they found a gambler's notebook that showed that Pete Rose had bet on them while he was a player, at least in the 1986 season. Now, at that point, he was also the manager of the Cincinnati Reds. So technically, if he says, I only bet on them as a manager, well, was he wearing his manager's hat or his player's hat when he bet on the team? In the 86 season, he was done. I think that was his last year in Major League Baseball as a player. So, I look at this also and think if he was betting as a manager and betting heavily, as the betting slips revealed, and he did say he always bet on his team to win, even so, it's not like he stopped playing and said, I wonder what I'll do to scratch my competitive itch. I think I'll gamble. No. Brent Musburger talked about this recently, that, and you may even remember this, that there was a week in the 70s where Jimmy the Greek had to be someplace else, couldn't be there for the NFL today. So Pete, who is an active player, and it's funny that the commissioner, who would have been the commissioner at the time, probably Bowie Kuhn, didn't say anything. He wasn't about baseball, but Pete Rose was on the NFL Today. Now, you couldn't give point spreads then, but, they had the checklist for Jimmy the Greek, and if he was, check marks on one side for one team, you knew that they were going to cover the spread, and Pete did that as well for the NFL Today. He was well-versed in this. And I also worked for a while with Steve Fredericks. Steve Fredericks, this is when he was like between gigs in Philadelphia, and he used to come up to New York and do weekends at WFAN, and I worked with him for a bunch of weekends. It was maybe a couple of years. And he said that he did a show with Pete Rose when he was playing with the Phillies. And all Pete wanted to talk about off the air was the football games and the point spreads. And I don't know if they talked about baseball, but I'm sure they did. They knew. They knew. So that's part of the whole picture here. And, whether he bet on baseball as only a manager or whether he did it as a player as well, he bet on baseball. He broke the cardinal rule of the game. And the question is, do they put him in despite that? And I think the compromise might be that they will, but they'll put a line on the plaque that he was banned permanently, a lifetime ban, which is what it was. And now that's expired along with his life, that now he can go in the Hall of Fame. Okay, that's enough for me today. Bram is coming up next, I'm sure, with lots of schedule reaction and more. I'll be back here tomorrow at 9 a.m.